this afternoon before we get started. Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us again for this webinar today. We're going to give it a couple more minutes for folks to join us before we get started. All right, I see that we are still having some folks jump on. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll give it one more second before we go ahead and kick this off. Again, thank you for making the time to join us today. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rudy Zamora, and I am the Program Director for Chispa Nevada, a program of the League of Conservation Voters. I want to welcome everyone, and again, thank everyone for taking the time to come on. If we can have everyone introduce themselves and tell us where they're joining us from, what part of the state, that would be awesome. We can use the question function or the chat function that should be available and the control panel that popped up on the side of the screen. But first, before we get started, I want to make sure that we go over some housekeeping rules. Remember that during the webinar, we're asking everyone to stay muted unless you are talking to reduce the background noise so that everyone can hear clearly. The chat box for questions or the question box will be up for questions and for help. We encourage you to submit your questions. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar and after all presentations have gone. Also, just for everyone's information, this webinar will be recorded so that we can share with our different partners and folks that were not able to attend today. So just wanted to give everyone up that heads up. But let's dive right into the webinar and tell you why we're here today. Today we're here to talk about why invest in the benefits of electric school buses, why now, and how school districts can, what fundings are available for school districts to to apply for this money. And then we're going to hear a successful case study from Twin Rivers United School District that is the biggest school district with the largest fleet of electric school buses. But before we get going, I want to share a little bit about my story. I've been with the organization for the last 5 years, and this is something that's dear and near to me. I am the father of a school-age child that about 1.5 years ago suffered an asthma attack that led him to go into cardiac arrest and respiratory failure. So that is a story that unfortunately happens way too often in our communities. So I want to make sure that my story is not repeated with any other family. And we want to make sure that this is an opportunity for everyone to learn. But before moving on, again, I want to thank WRA and SWEEP for hosting this webinar with us. And I also want to thank the presenters. We have Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability. We have the Washoe County Health District joining us, as well as NV Energy and the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. As I mentioned, Twin Rivers Unified School District and the Washoe County School District are also on the call today. So we are going to kick this off, and we're going to kick it right over to two of our presenters on why invest in the benefits and what are the benefits of electric school buses. I'm going to pass it over to Matt Fromer, Senior Associate at the Transportation Program at SWEEP. And Matt focuses on electric vehicles, policy and electric vehicle integration into electric grids. And then we're going to hear from Carolina, who is with Chispa Nevada, who will talk about why we started the Clean Buses for Healthy Niños campaign in 2017. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Matt.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you, Rudy. Like Rudy said, I work for the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, or SWEEP, on clean transportation policy in 5 states. We're based in Colorado, but do a lot of work in Nevada, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite states to work in because of new opportunities like this. So just to kind of set the table on electric school buses, why we care. So first, in Nevada, transportation is the number 1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. The transportation sector surpassed the electricity sector in 2015. It's partially because the electricity sector is getting cleaner with the closure of coal plants, and partially because we are driving more, and we're driving, a lot of us are driving larger vehicles like SUVs and trucks. So now the transportation sector accounts for about 35% of total greenhouse gas emissions in the state. Just this last year, the Nevada legislature passed Senate Bill 19254, the climate goals. So these are greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals of 28% by 2025, 45% by 2030, and 100% by 2050. And those are as compared to 2005 levels. Those are economy-wide. So that's electricity, transportation, buildings, agriculture, everything. So we need to be looking at each one of these sectors. Nevada's made quite a bit of progress, I'd say, on the electricity sector with things like the 50% RPS and other policies, supportive policies for renewables. We really need to be doing the same for transportation, buildings, and the other parts of the economy. In addition to the climate benefits, we're going to talk about the air quality benefits of electric vehicles. Clark County is in marginal non-attainment area for ground level ozone pollution or smog, which causes respiratory issues for a lot of people, as Rudy mentioned. And then some of the benefits on climate and air quality of electric school buses. So talking about zero tailpipe emissions, all the emissions associated with generating the energy to move the buses are at the power plant. So whether that's natural gas, renewables, it's those power plants, even if they're fossil fuel generation, they tend to be located away from the population centers. And then I think I had one more point on the last slide, but it was just to say that unlike the diesel school buses, electric school buses get cleaner each year they're on the grid alongside the electricity grid. So as we replace more fossil fuel generation with solar and wind and geothermal, the same bus you'd buy today gets cleaner every year. Now you can go to the next slide, please. So today in Nevada, there are just shy of 2,500 yellow school buses transporting over 167,000 students every day. School buses, I think, are the largest mass transit system in the country, and we should applaud that. I mean, it's where they're already reducing pollution and congestion in a big way. Think about replacing all the single occupancy vehicles, the parents driving their students or their kids to school every day. We just need to go a bit further and electrify those vehicles now. To look at the economic benefits of electric buses, there's a report from US PIRG released last year that shows that electric school buses compared to diesel reduce the fuel costs and the maintenance costs. For fuel costs, we're talking about $2,000 per year. I think that's probably a bit conservative. We met with one electric school bus operator in North Dakota recently, said they were paying about 14 cents a mile to charge the electric school bus versus about 40 cents per mile to run their diesel school bus. So about a third of the cost on fuel, and then quite a bit in maintenance cost savings. There's no oil changes. You talk to, I mean, this is for passenger EVs, but if you talk to the car dealers, they'll say the only reason an EV owner brings in their vehicle to the dealer is to rotate the tires. They're incredibly durable. They have fewer moving parts. When you add up all the fuel and maintenance costs over the lifetime of the bus, it can add up to about $170,000 or between $170,000 and $240,000 in the lifetime operations and maintenance cost savings. And those, as you can see, the font is incredibly small right there, but the bar on the left there is the total cost of ownership for a diesel school bus, and the bar on the right is total cost of ownership for an electric. And the blue is the upfront cost of the bus. So you'll see it's more expensive upfront to buy electric than diesel, but then you're saving costs over time. So the total costs are lower for electric than for diesel. But still, we find that a lot of school districts may not have the money to invest in an electric school bus and cover those upfront costs. So we've been looking at innovative funding sources, things like the Volkswagen settlement. I know in Colorado, the most recent round of the Volkswagen settlement funded 5 or 6 electric school buses. Five or six different school districts are going to receive electric school buses in the next year or so, and we're working with utilities to figure out the charging requirements for those buses. And then third, I just want to point out the innovative leasing options. You can work with the bus manufacturers to talk about battery leasing, and maybe the school district can make those payments over time with the operating cost savings at the lower fuel and maintenance. So some innovative financing options there. And lastly, I just want to mention a projection from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. It does a lot of work on clean energy and transportation. And they're anticipating that by 2030, 84% of new bus purchases, that's both transit and school buses, will be electric. And just for reference, that number is about double their projection for the light duty vehicle market. So they really think this market's going to grow a lot, even more quickly than it will for passenger vehicles, which is pretty telling. Now I'm going to hand it over to Carolina. She's going to continue with the next slides.
Great, thanks, Matt. Thank you so much for going over. Now that we've heard a little bit about both the emissions benefits and the economic benefits of electric school buses, we wanted to touch on the public health aspect. And May is Asthma Awareness Month, so a really great time to be having this discussion. So as you can see here, diesel is not necessarily safe for students to breathe. There's been several studies that have found that diesel is actually a cancer-causing agent, as it has been defined by the EPA. It's also known to shorten lifespans and increase rates for heart and lung illness, which disproportionately hurts children because their lungs are just developing. And as we're talking about asthma, it's something that also particularly hits communities of color, Black and brown children in particular. They suffer from asthma at disproportionate rates. Latino children are actually 2 times more likely to visit the ER due to asthma complications, while Black children are actually 3 times more likely to die from asthma. So obviously this is an issue that needs to be fixed because these are also the kids who are riding in school buses to and from school daily. Another benefit is that we've also found that students that are exposed to less pollution actually tend to do better in school. So certain pollutants, like the kinds that are found in diesel exhaust, can affect students' math and science and literature scores. So when you remove that pollution, student scores actually went up. So that's another benefit that we have to academic performance as well as to health. So we know that by switching to electric school buses, we might be able to improve kids' health, remove some of the reasons that they tend to miss school, like asthma, which is actually the leading cause of school absences for children, as well as improve their ability to focus and their academic performance in school. So based on all of these reasons, that's why CHISPA founded the Clean Buses for Healthy Niños campaign in 2017, specifically to encourage school districts to use Volkswagen funds to invest in electric school buses, knowing that they are this safer option for children. So next slide, Woody, please. And so just to recap, these are some of the benefits of electric school buses. Not only do we have better air quality and healthier kids, but we can also offer long-term cost savings for school districts, as well as for all ratepayers potentially, with some exciting technology that we can also briefly touch on that might help every ratepayer that participates in the electric grid save some money by being able to better manage energy loads. So with that, I'll turn it back to Rudy so that we can talk about some of the air quality in Nevada.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolina, and thank you, Matt, for that awesome presentation. We are going to keep this webinar a little bit interactive, so it's time for a quick poll. I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And the question is your school district interested in electric school buses? So if you can please answer that. Answer that, and I will share results. All right, we will share. Looks like that poll closed on our end beforehand. So go ahead and comment in the questions or the chat box if your school districts are interested in electric school buses. We're hoping that out of this presentation, folks get some new information on how to apply for funds or have some of their questions answered by Twin Rivers, again, which is one of the successful programs that we have seen across the country. But let's go ahead and move on right now. Let's go ahead and why now? The air quality and public health in Nevada. We have Jody joining, Jody Betchell with the Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability joining us. And then we also have Daniel Inouye from the Washoe County Health District, who will talk about Nevada's air quality and how this can impact public health, especially in children who ride the diesel school buses. So let's kick it off to Jody.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Rudy said, my name is Jody Bechtel. I'm the Assistant Director of Clark County's Department of Environment and Sustainability. We are the Air Pollution Control Agency for Clark County. So we've already heard a bit about air quality and health issues. Good air quality is fundamental to our health and well-being. Contaminants in our air can adversely affect our health, and poor air quality can have long-term health implications. As Carolina mentioned, it can cause cardiovascular and respiratory illnesses, it can affect lung capacity, and it can aggravate and contribute to asthma and other illnesses. Next slide. So the impact of poor air quality is felt, especially by people who already have breathing sensitivities or lung ailments. And again, you've heard that it also disproportionately impacts children, low income and underserved communities. So in Clark County, we have a population of over 2 million people, and we get over 40 million visitors annually, hoping that that continues. We want everyone who's living in and visiting our community to have good air to breathe, and we are the largest populated area of the state of Nevada. Next slide. So in Clark County, as was mentioned, we are in marginal non-attainment for ozone. That is the lowest level of non-attainment, but obviously we want to do better, and we can do better. We have over 1.4 million vehicles on our roadways, which are the largest contributors of pollutants, but we have additional challenges as well here in Clark County. So our topography and climate, unfortunately, form a perfect oven for cooking up ozone. So that is a challenge that is difficult to tackle. Also, our location causes us to receive pollutants from other areas. So we get a lot of transport of pollutants from areas like Southern California. And I think a lot of people on the call or this webinar are probably well aware, you know, LA is one of the most polluted cities in our nation, and they have a lot of challenges and ozone challenges as well. So we do get a lot of that pollutants transported to Southern Nevada here. So I mention this only because we've actually had 2 exceedances of ozone in May this year, earlier in the month. This is a time when school buses are not operating, and there are far less vehicles on the road right now due to the COVID pandemic that we're all working through. And so what that means for us is everything we can do to lower ozone will help us here in Southern Nevada, especially because there are things we cannot control, like our topography and our climate and our location and transport of other pollutants. So what we can do is things like get cleaner vehicles on the road. So I'm not going to go much into the particulate matter, but we do have some challenges in exceedance days. Most of those are caused by wildfires, dust storms, fireworks, and those sorts of things, but we are in attainment. Next slide. And so this slide just shows graphs of our exceedance days for particulate matter and for ozone. Again, ozone is our biggest challenge. 2018 was a particularly bad year. That was due mostly to the extensive wildfires that were occurring across the Western United States and other parts of the United States. Overall, as you can see by the trend lines, we've had great success in improving our air quality. There is still work to be done. And again, every effort counts. We're excited about efforts like this to highlight the benefits of electric buses. And that was it. I didn't get into a lot of detail. I will be around at the end of the webinar if there are questions to be had. So with the next slide, I will thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dan and Washoe.
Hi, thank you. My name is Daniel Inoue. I'm with the Washoe County Health District in the Air Quality Management Division. Here in Northern Nevada, especially the Reno-Sparks area, ozone is our biggest challenge. This is a chart of how our ozone concentrations are in comparison to the EPA standards. The NAAQS stands for National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Those are health-based standards that the Environmental Protection Agency establishes and reviews on a periodic basis. What you can see from this chart is that as the standards have been reviewed, EPA has found that lower levels or lower concentrations of ozone is causing health effects to the general population. So that's one of our challenges. As the standards get strengthened, and our population grows, that becomes our challenge. You can see that with the latest air quality standard that was promulgated in 2015, we are basically at 100% or more of the standard. You can also notice that the peak in 2008 and the dip in 2011 and 12, if you look at that, that's very much related or very similar to what the economy looked like as well. It was going gangbusters in 2006, 7, and 8. We hit the recession, and now we're in that recovery phase. So you can see how air quality and the economy are strongly tied together. Next slide, please. So ozone is a secondary pollutant. That means that it's a combination of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. This is an inventory for Washoe County. You can see that transportation is the largest category of ozone precursors. And within the transportation sector, the on-road mobile, which includes cars, trucks, and school buses, is our largest category. The way that we're trying to improve air quality in our area is not only to get cleaner vehicles, but also to reduce vehicle miles traveled. So that combination, especially with the on-road sector, is our strategy moving forward. Next slide, please. Next slide, Rudy. There we go. So you're probably more familiar with the public health impacts of air pollution, especially the higher rates of chronic diseases. There are the direct medical costs, but some other things to consider are the lost workdays that are tied in with poor air quality. But one of the strongest messages we can also sell is the economic impact related to poor air quality. Not meeting the standard doesn't mean the economy can't grow, but there are certain conditions that are going to be connected with that. The Clean Air Act requires progressively more stringent requirements until the standards are met. So once you become a non-attainment area, EPA is going to stay there until local areas or areas improve air quality and meet those standards. Non-attainment can also mean additional air pollution equipment for industry, which can be very, very expensive. And another possible requirement for long-term non-attainment is emission offsets up to 1.5 to 1. What that means is if an industry comes in, if they have for every 1 ton of pollutant that they emit, would have to offset that somewhere else in the area up to 1.5 times. Another consequence of not meeting the standard is possible loss of federal highway dollars, and a strong message also is that not meeting the standard will mean adjacent counties and states become more attractive for new, expanding, and existing businesses. We see the challenges that industry has in states like California, and how states like Nevada and Idaho and Utah are seeing more industry coming from those states that have high pollution levels. So that summarizes, and that I hope gives you a good picture of why meeting the air quality standards and improving air quality is important throughout the state of Nevada. So with that, I'll turn it back to Rudy.
Awesome. Thank you, Jody and Daniel, for that presentation. That was very informative. So now we move on to how. I know this is a question that we all have, where the funding incentives are coming from, or different opportunities that school districts might have. And I'm happy to say that today we are joined by Sarah Chatterjee from NV Energy, who will be talking about a grant program that NV Energy currently has. And then we also will hear from Jeff Kinder from the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, who will talk a little bit about the Volkswagen Settlement Fund and how school districts can take advantage of that. So I will hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Rudy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending the webinar. I am Sarah Chatterjee. I am the Director of Renewable Energy Programs at NV Energy. So what that really means is I get to handle all of the really fun and exciting programs, including behind-the-meter renewable energy interconnections for solar, wind, and hydro, energy storage programs and incentives, as well as our wide suite of electric vehicle infrastructure demonstration programs. So today I'll be talking about our electric school bus program, but I also want to touch briefly on a couple of our other initiatives. So we are talking about school buses here, but you can also avail of incentives, for example, for workplace charging and for public charging. So if you're a school and you're looking at putting in a transportation electrification plan, that can include your school bus, but you should also look at some of these other opportunities in terms of workplace charging for teachers and or public charging for folks that are coming to the school and students that are coming to the school. NV Energy is also working on building out the Nevada Electric Highway. So, transportation electrification is a big initiative here. And we're really excited about all of this work. So next slide, please. Today, I will be talking about a few things. I'll give you a little bit of background about how our programs came to be. I'll give you an update on the status of our current programs and our current program year. And then I'm going to talk about just a little bit of what we filed for our new program year, which will start in July 1st of this year. Next slide, please. So our electric vehicle infrastructure demonstration program really came about from Senate Bill 145 in 2017. That gave us the opportunity to file some programs and launch some programs in 2018 to really provide, incentivize, and help accelerate the transportation electrification market. So in 2018, in September of 2018, we launched our custom grant program. That was our electric vehicle custom grant program for the first time. And even at that time, we started some early discussions on looking at some electric school buses and how we can help some school districts really avail of that custom grant money. While the grant program was not specifically targeted for bus applications, it was a mechanism available for customers to be able to use and implement some creative transportation electrification programs. So we had from 2018 to 2019 about $1.5 million in incentives available through that program. In 2019, we had Senate Bill 299 that was approved in May, and that authorized us to not only incentivize the infrastructure, but also incentivize the purchase of the vehicles. So this very specifically gave us the ability to support school districts, public school districts, with funding up to 75% of both the vehicle and the infrastructure costs, which is pretty exciting. So that went into effect as of July 1st of 2019. The Public Utilities Commission authorized us to enact some of the goals of Senate Bill 299 under our custom grant program. So in 2019, we were able to kind of modify that custom grant program and engage with a number of school districts in Nevada, across Nevada, to talk about interest and see how we could best tailor and support our approach. So for this program year, running from July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, we are still operating under a $1.5 million approved budget, specifically allocated for public school buses. And that in July 1st of 2020, we are looking forward to continued approval for a continued program designed specifically for school buses as well. We have applications that can get submitted all throughout this period. There's no application period. It's an open application enrollment. And you get your funds reserved for at least 12 months, and you can request an additional 12-month extension if needed. Next slide, please. So today, we currently already have one application that has been received. We are working with the school district and going through review and providing some technical assistance and support. We do expect some additional applications to be received during this current program year, which should say June 30th, not 20th, and 2020. Some numbers got mixed up there. So NV Energy has met with a number of different school districts across Nevada. We have done a number of items, and I'll cover some of those items on the next slide here. But really, the goal is to try to provide school districts with as much support as we can from a technical advisory capacity, as well as support from any kind of financial analysis. So we meet with customers, and if you're interested and you want to set up a meeting with us and talk through this, we are more than happy to meet with you and talk through how we can make this program successful for you. We have an online application portal to make this easy. So that's accessible from our NV Energy website under Clean Energy and Electric Vehicles. So if you are wanting to put in an application for a program, you can do that online and it will get tracked through there. We also offer assistance with walking through that application process, and many times can do that alongside of your staff to help you really get these applications in and answer any questions that might come up from the application process. Since the beginning of this year, we have partnered with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, and I'll let Jeff talk more about that. But really, I think the strength here is being able to partner these funding sources and really deliver projects that are potentially covered up to 100% of the costs of a school bus and the infrastructure. So that's super exciting. Next slide, please. So as part of working with the school districts, we've identified a number of different areas that we really can help. And so everything from technology, understanding how the bill might be changed, what rate you might go on if you go on to an electric vehicle rate, and then the business case support, right? So a lot of times trying to make this case is not simple, and there's a lot of different stakeholders and interested parties internally and externally to the school district that need to understand what is going on. So, from a technology perspective, we bring engineers to the table to really look at, well, what kind of buses are you looking at? What kind of charging equipment, electric vehicle supply equipment you might need? What power capacity do you really need? How fast do you need to charge? So that's where we're doing a lot of study. We're doing route analysis, really trying to optimize the use of the technology. With bill impact, we're looking at, okay, well, what rate are you currently on? Modeling if you put an electric vehicle on there with either fast charging or level 2 charging, what does that look like? What is the impact on the actual energy bill? And are there ways to optimize that, whether it's adding additional distributed energy resources or, designing maybe a charging strategy, managed charging where possible. So that's kind of the bill impact analysis. Rate analysis, we want to make sure that, the school district is very familiar with all the available and rates that they have, and that they're selecting the optimal rate for their situation. Situations can vary depending on use cases and type of equipment that are being used. So we do some rate optimization and some sensitivity analysis and can provide this information to the school districts and provide all of that and wrap it together along with the business case support and the financials, so payback period, other available funding sources that we're aware of, and return on investment to build that deck that you may need to be able to present in front of a school board, for example. So this is all part of our technical advisory services. We offer this in general too for our electric vehicle infrastructure demonstration program. But for the electric school bus program specifically, these are the types of analysis and discussions that we're having with schools. So if you're interested in engaging with us on that, feel free to reach out as well. Next slide, please. For the next program year, so from July 1st to June 30th, from coming up here, we have filed a new program. So in the current program year, we have the Electric Vehicle Custom Grant Program that was repurposed for school buses. Next year, we hope to have a separate custom grant program to be able to continue to meet creative transportation electrification projects, as well as a targeted program specifically for electric school buses. In the plan for that plan year, we proposed $3 million in incentives and to cover 75% of the actual vehicle as well as infrastructure costs. So this includes supporting, the actual charging equipment, the transformers, the panels, any installation materials, as well as the vehicle. So there's some training is included in there. As indicated there, 5% could be used for training. We know that bringing people along within the school district and having people understand how do you work on these vehicles and how do you maintain them, those are all questions that need to be answered. In this program, we've put in that the funds would be reserved for 24 months, and so it's 2 years instead of 12 months. And you can request potentially a one-time 1-year extension if needed. So that's the new program that is under approval. We're still waiting for commission approval. We have filed a stipulation with the commission in this docket and expect to hear back from the commission in June if we are getting approval on the program as proposed. So that is all I have for the programs that as they are with NV Energy. I will hand back over to either Jeff or Rudy to continue the presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. My contact information is on the screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that insightful information with us. I do see some questions start generating. Please remember that we are taking questions now, so please put those in the question section, and we will be answering them at the end of the webinar. But let's send it over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Rudy, and thanks for the introduction and giving us the opportunity to present today. As Rudy said, my name is Jeff Kinder. I'm a Deputy Administrator with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. I do want to point out on our webinar today with me is members of our NDEP's AIR team, Danilo Dragoni, Sig Yanaras, Joe Pereira, and Kathleen Morrison. That's our team that manages the VW Settlement Grant Funding Program. I'd like to start with Nevada's goals for the VW State Trust. Those are detailed in Nevada's Beneficiary Mitigation Plan, and there's 3 goals. The first is to reduce nitrogen oxides, or NOx, emissions from areas of Nevada that bear a disproportionate share of NOx pollution and potentially other pollutants. Reduce NOx emissions from areas of Nevada where the vehicles subject to the settlement were, are, or will be operated. And lastly, to support long-term investments towards a zero-emission transportation sector within Nevada. Nevada received approximately a little bit more than $24.8 million as their share of the VW settlement. And as reflected in Nevada's goals, you know, the settlement is really about NOx abatement because that was the pollutant of concern with the cheating vehicles. And NDEP, through our competitive grant program, has really strived to get the greatest NOx reduction for each dollar that we spend through the trust. To date, we've had 2 very successful grant cycles. In 2018 and 2019, we've awarded nearly $10 million of our allotment through those 2 grant cycles. Those awards have gone to 3 basic areas. About 70% has gone to electrification projects in the state, about 17% to alternative fuels projects, and 13% to diesel vehicle replacements with other diesel vehicles. Those projects were spread throughout the state, but concentrated, you know, in our urban areas through working with our fellow air quality agencies in Clark and Washoe County. NDEP will not be offering a 2020 competitive grant cycle as we work through completion of the projects that we have currently funded. But looking forward to 2021, that competitive grant cycle, there'll be approximately $18 million available for projects. I do want to mention Nevada's Clean Diesel Program, as Sarah mentioned in her presentation. We also do administer that program, commonly known as DERA. Many people think that's a diesel-to-diesel only program, but it is not. We can support electrification through that program as well. So we encourage people looking for projects to inquire about that project as well. That's about it for me, so I will turn it back to Rudy.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. It is time for another quick poll. Let's give this another try. The poll question this time is, let me pop it up on everyone's screens. The question is, what is the number 1 barrier that you see your school district adopting electric school buses? It's a multiple choice. Is it upfront cost, lack of training, administrative capacity, unaware of options? And if there's others, please go ahead and comment that in the comment box or in the question section. We'll give it a couple more seconds to go ahead and give folks an opportunity to answer that. Awesome, we're gonna go ahead and close that poll. Hopefully everyone got a chance to answer that question, but let's go ahead and share the results. We see that everyone is concerned about the upfront costs. We see 73% of people in this that are participating today, their biggest concern is that upfront cost. But hopefully we are providing options for everyone and opportunities for that funding to come up. I want to go ahead and move over to a success with Twin Rivers Unified School District. We have Tim Shannon, who is the Director of Transportation for the Twin Rivers Unified School District, with us today, who will tell us about what the process was for them to become one of the largest school districts to pilot these programs. I know that Tim has some really good information for us. So Tim, over to you.
Hi, Rudy. I'm only seeing your quick poll up right now.
We should be on your first slide now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Rudy and team, thanks for the opportunity to tell our story. Twin Rivers is a little bit about what we are and the kind of students we service in the community. We're a 127-mile school district. We service about 5,000 students in 52 schools. We are a Title I school district with 87.9% free and reduced lunch, but we also serve 100% lunches because we have applied for grant money for the next 4 years. We currently, what we did was we started out in 2015 in courting our local air district and our California Air Resources Board to look at opportunities to deploy electric school buses. We looked at them because we had a bunch of old diesels and we needed to expand our fleet, but didn't have very much money. So we competed, we kind of partnered in with 2 other school districts, and we competed for a grant for 29 school buses. Twin Rivers received 16 of those school buses, and we have been running them since late 2016, early 2017, with some great success. We currently have 30 electric buses in our fleet and 27 more on the way, and we plan on electrifying over 90% of our fleet. We're going to install 82 chargers, and we're working really closely with our current air district and our electric provider, which is Sacramento Metropolitan Utility District. One of the things, and I believe there's another slide on here. One of the things that really caught our eye and realized that we wanted to expand into full electric deployment is that we save about 60% in maintenance and about 80% on fuel. That's about $15,000 per year with just our current fleet, the original fleet of 16. We will save lots more money, and fortunately in California, which I would encourage you to work with your state leaders to work on carbon credits, a carbon credit fund. So we received $75,000 last quarter in carbon credit revenue, which reduced our cost of fuel to 0 plus money to purchase more vehicles in the future. We have financed through quite a few different state funding programs and local programs. Our first award was a little shy of $5 million for the first 16. We have also participated in California Energy Commission and was awarded $3.8 million for an additional 10 buses. And then we've also combined those funds for another round of grant money with HFIB, which is a hybrid voucher program that allowed us to purchase 9 buses. The district kicked in some money, and then so did Sacramento Air District. And then our next recent round of purchases is through Sacramento AQMD and HFIB. We received HFIB money of a little less than $4 million and an additional amount of $5.6 million from our local air district so that we can upgrade our infrastructure and purchased 22 additional buses. So we are moving along the way for electrification because it not only makes sense for financial sense, it makes sense for clean air for kids and community. I mean, used to barely be able to breathe walking through our bus yard. And as one former bus driver, a current bus driver, but he said, I started out working in diesel and could hardly breathe, and now it's a breath of fresh air, being kind of funny. Do we have any other slides? Some of our successes, cleaner and healthier air, everybody likes them. It's they're safe. We have seatbelts on all our buses. We have clean to 0 emission. It has great performance. in all weather. It's a quieter ride. One of the, tell you a little story that prompted us to do this one program called having to do with educating kids and community, is that I was talking to a student while on board with the LA Times, and he asked the student, you know, what do your parents think about these buses? And the little girl said, well, I went home and told my dad, and he said there's no such thing as an electric bus. So we produced T-shirts and sent pamphlets home to educate the public, which has been a great success for our community. I think that may be the last slide, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that awesome presentation.
Yeah, I could go on forever about it. I mean, I think the best use of my time here in the future is have people ask me questions, and I can give them some great answers about the successes we've had and why really every school bus should be electric.
Yes, thank you. And Tim brings up a really good point. Remember, we're going to be answering questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions for Tim, please go ahead and drop them in the question section, and he will be happy to answer that. But let's go ahead and move into progress in Nevada. Let's talk about Washoe County. We are being joined today by Jason Geddes from the Washoe County School District, who will be telling us a little bit about what the plans are that they have. I'll kick it off over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Rudy. Basically, our school district is looking at adding electric buses in on a pilot basis. A couple of years ago, the Board of Trustees unanimously approved a conservation and sustainability policy for the district, and embedded within that policy was addressing air pollution through alternative transportation methods, looking at our white fleet and our bus fleet. And right now, we've been working with NV Energy and NDEP and Washoe County Air Quality and the fleet services within the school district, and looking at options that we could implement within the school district. We got permission to move ahead through the meetings and doing some preliminary evaluations. NV Energy was fantastic in doing route analysis. We sent them a list of all of our buses and all of our routes, and they were able to perform detailed routes analysis on specific routes that we were looking at. And just recently, you know, with the whole unknown financial situation brought about by the pandemic, we've had internal discussions about, is this something we're going to put on hold or keep moving forward? And the leadership in the district wants us to keep moving forward and developing the plans. So right now we're putting together the grant applications to submit to NV Energy and NDEP. We've been held up a little bit because our current restrictions don't really allow us to gather some of the data that we need to gather to do a detailed analysis. Primarily on, we're looking at acquiring 2 of the buses with 2 fast charge stations and placing them over at our transportation yard, which is over in East Sparks. And that also has a slight bit of a challenge because it is within the floodplain. So we've got to work with the city of Sparks and address all the floodplain issues with that specific site and make sure we've got the electricity capacity for those fast chargers. And really, that was chosen because it's our primary yard where most of our buses are stored, and it's a terrain that is good for the pilot. But it also, the routes that we pick service Title I schools with a high number of free and reduced lunch students, and they are in the urban core where we have a greater concern of students being exposed to air quality, urban air quality issues. So it's kind of an environmental justice demonstration project as well as an EV demonstration project. And you know, the idea is to get a couple of buses in and get our fleet guys used to servicing them and operating them. making sure the charging station infrastructure works, and prioritizing the routes to make sure the buses can service the route. And one of the things that I'll ask Tim to talk about later if he doesn't address it is, we've been trying to find electric school buses that are in our climate zone. We haven't seen many that have to deal with the hills and dealing with snow and moving around in a lot of snow. And we just need to establish a comfort level while we're gathering the data and putting the pilot program in place. But our goal is to, upon successful completion of the pilot, is to start expanding the bus fleet more and more electric wherever we can. That's pretty much it, Rudy.
Great, thank you, Jason. We were also hoping to be joined by Mark, the Director of Operations in Carson City School District today, but he was unfortunately called away and can miss a planning meeting. But we do want to thank Mark for his support on electric school buses and moving Carson City in this direction. And that does wrap up the end of our presentations. I want to go ahead and open it up to questions. I do have a couple of questions in the question section. So if you have not gotten those questions into us, please go ahead and take this time now to ask those questions. And we can start with the first one that came from Doug. And that was, can funding today be used for white fleet and or support vehicles, vans, and trucks? And I think the best person suited to answer this question might be Sarah. Sarah, do you want to take a stab at this question?
Sure, yeah. So we do have an incentive program specifically for electric vehicle supply equipment for the fleet category. So it is specific to the actual infrastructure, however, not the vehicles. But the incentive is $3,000 per port for a level 2 charger. So if you're looking at putting in chargers for fleet vehicles, you can avail of that up to 75% of the project cost. Or if you feel you need a direct current fast charger or a DC fast charger, it's $400 per kW up to $40,000 or 50% of the project cost. So quite a bit of incentive funding available there to support your infrastructure.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. The next question comes from Lena. And this question is, between the ENVI grant the Nevada Energy Grant Program and the Volkswagen Settlement Fund, how many buses can be bought given the cost? Does anybody want to take a shot at this question? Sarah.
This is Sarah. I could probably start, and maybe Jeff might want to weigh in a little bit, but essentially with the current program, I can speak to the current program in terms of the available funding. So we have the $1.5 million that's available today. Clearly, the actuals are going to make a big difference in terms of the end number that we get to. So depending on how much make ready or infrastructure work is going to need to be done at the site, that'll definitely impact that project cost. But generally, we expect with this current funding that goes through June 30th to be able to fund at least 5 electric school buses. So beyond that, our incentive budget that we proposed with the commission for the next 12-month period should be able to, we doubled, the request doubled in incentive level, but I would have to defer on the Clean Diesel Fund in terms of their contribution there.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'll jump in and talk about the vehicles. As Sarah talked about, a lot about the infrastructure, the VW settlement and the Clean Diesel program, that's really about vehicles. We don't know year to year what we'll get through the DERA program for the Clean Diesel program. But again, for 2021 competitive grant cycle in Nevada, we still have about $8 million remaining. It's hard to put that into a number of vehicles because there's so many choices and options out there, but that's the dollar amounts we're looking at.
Great, thank you both for that answer. And Lena does have a follow-up question on a different subject. This one's directed towards Jason. Jason, how long will the Washoe County School District pilot programs be for?
it really just depends on how long it takes us to get the infrastructure in place and get the buses going on. We would like to get a full season all the way through with the buses to make sure that, you know, the heaters and the snow issues and all those are addressed through the January, February months. So it would ideally it would be a whole school year. So depending on how long it takes us to get the infrastructure and the buses delivered and get them running, it would probably be one full school year.
Awesome, great, thank you. And then the next question we have is from Jennifer Cantley, and this one's directed towards Tim. Tim, how much money did you receive in Twin Rivers for the carbon reduction?
So so far we received over, because we just started putting it in this last year, we've received about $89,000 for carbon reduction. Did you hear that?
Perfect, thank you. Yep, thank you so much. The next question is coming from Sue, and it's also directed to towards Tim. She says, would love to hear more from speaker from Twin Rivers, how they convince themselves and others to be out in front. How did they engage the school board, school community, etc., and what arguments were most convincing?
So I will tell you that we had about $930,000 to spend on new school buses, and that's not going to get you very far. So when we actually had won the grant, I had Senator Cerna write a letter to our school board to say what the advantages were, and we got a lot of promo material from the California Air District talking about asthma and the benefits to kids and the community for electric school buses. So we turned what we thought we could get 3 to 4 buses. We got the electrics, which we got 16. So that was a big plus when people said, hey, you got 16 buses for $930,000. And I said, yeah, and that included the infrastructure for 22 buses. So it was a pretty easy sell. With, you know, there was some skepticism there for people who were, you know, big diesel lovers. But after the second year and them seeing how we still have the same original tires from 3 years ago on the buses, and we still haven't had to change the brakes, and we reduced fuel cost 80%. And the kids love the buses because they're cool, you know, they're cool looking, but they're also cool inside during our 100-degree days. It wasn't that hard to convince them. You know, basically it was like they say in Missouri, show me. All we had to do is show them, and they're all believers now.
That's awesome. That's a great story, Tim. We're hoping to get those buses out here in Nevada, and I know that Jason, Mark, and CCSD are all working along with all the other school districts to get those buses out here on the road. And then we have one question from Jennifer Cantley, but again, this is the opportunity for folks to to submit your questions. We are here to answer any questions, concerns that you guys might have. Take advantage that we have Tim on the line who is experienced with this, and if there's any questions that he can answer, please type it in so we can go ahead and get it answered for y'all. But the question from Jennifer Cantley is, how long can you go on one charge on an electric school bus?
So I will tell you, we were very concerned. I guess this is for me, Tim.
Yes.
We were very concerned that we wouldn't get the range out of them. We did add an extra battery to our smaller Transtex, but the original 8 Lions, we can go about 97 miles on a full charge, and with the air conditioner on, about 92. We do take advantage of midday charging because out west we have solar. So during the J curve and the midday when school buses traditionally are parked, they are taking a charge. So those are our original ones. Now, the ones that are coming now are 125 mile range, 150 mile range buses. So we'll be able to take even more advantage of that. And these are level 2, which are regular 220 volt or 240 volt buses. They're not DC fast charging, and as soon as we get into that, we'll be able to even take advantage of more range.
That's great. And Jennifer has a quick follow-up, and I think you touched a little bit on this, but how long does it take for the to charge a bus?
It takes 4.5 hours to charge a bus.
4.5 hours to charge a full bus. That's
right.
Awesome. This is one last opportunity for folks to submit questions. If they have not done so, please go ahead and put them in the question section. But I know, Jason, you had a question for Tim that you said you were going to wait and ask at the end. Do you want to take advantage of now and ask that question?
Sure. Really quickly, before we move on to the next question, just really quickly on that, how long it takes to charge a bus. I would like to add to though, generally that will depend too if you're doing DC fast charging, level 2 charging, and the size of the battery. So 1 hour might be that case, but if you're doing a level 2 charger or a lower powered DC fast charger, it could be longer than that. Just wanted to make sure that I got that in there. Apologies.
No, perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks, Rudy. And Tim, it was really a question in your slide there. You talked about in all weather conditions. And as I mentioned, we're concerned about snow and ice. And I was just wondering what sort of experience your fleet has had going up into the Sierras or dealing with snow and ice, and how that's worked out.
So we haven't had to take the electric buses in snow and ice, but I do talk to a lot of people that do deal with the snow and ice. For mountain conditions, Rescue Unified borrowed one of our buses, and they now have 7 electric buses. They're outside of Sacramento up in the hills, and they do very well in the mountainous ranges. As a matter of fact, you know, that we have this term in the electric bus industry of hypermiling. That's how many additional miles you can get going downhill using the regenerative braking. As for driving the buses in the snow, Michigan, there's a district in Michigan that has 4 electric buses, and they are driving them in the snow. But Lion Electric, who sells the buses, they have 1 million miles, and they drive their buses in very inclement weather, in the snow and ice. I know that you guys get a lot. We don't get snow in Sacramento maybe once every 8 years. And now that we have climate change, probably once in every 50. But there's a lot of, that's a good question, but there's a lot of answers out there. And I would contact Lion Electric on their snow experience and who they've sold them to up there. I think you would be really happy with the answers they give you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're muted.
Rudy, I don't think we can hear you.
I just realized I was on mute. Sorry about that. Apologies. The last question that came in is, what district in Michigan has electric school buses, and what have we have a force? Sorry. And do we have a force or two due to the weather being different in Michigan? I don't know if you have reached. Has anyone talked to them in Michigan? Maybe you did, Tim, when you were looking at the different terrain, different buses or programs.
So I don't remember the actual district in Michigan, even though I was on a webinar yesterday out of Connecticut. But if you want to email me, I'm more than happy to get whoever wants connected to those people. When we got into the electric bus business, I will say there were only 2 providers of electric buses. That was the motive powered smaller ones, which we use for special needs routes, and then the the Type Cs that Lion built. And both of them had a lot of experience on the road. I will tell you though that in Sacramento, we do get some cold days, but not like where you're at. We're preheating the buses. They're plugged in. We're preheating them and we set a timer prior to them going out on route. They're nice and warm. So they use less power.
Awesome. And then the next question comes from Alexa. Does NV Energy and NDEP have any more opportunities for funding besides the ones that were presented on today's webinar?
This is Jeff. I'll jump in there and say currently it's just the VW State Trust and the Clean Diesel program from NDEP.
Perfect, thank you. And then the last question I'm seeing here comes from Diane. Are there enough charging stations throughout Northern Nevada to accommodate using an electric bus for intramural sports? Some of our students have long distance and charging could be an issue. I think that might be a good one for either Jason or whoever feels like they're equipped to answer this question. Please go ahead and jump in.
This is Jason. I'd have to defer to Sarah. We're looking to install our first 2, and that's all we have so far.
Yeah, I think, you know, and perhaps Tim might have some insight into this. I know that, you know, in some of my conversations with some of our customers, I think the discussion was, you know, driving across state with a school bus potentially. I think that electric school bus will definitely have a challenge, you know, doing that long of a haul. I mean, granted, there is charging now through the various highway corridors, and so that is there, and that is possible and accessible. However, I think, you know, that's something that's going to need to be weighed by each school district, and you know, among the school bus fleet, which, you know, if you're putting 1, 2, 3 different school buses in there, kind of how you prioritize getting your feet wet with this pilot funding. So in terms of practicality of driving a school bus to you know, sporting events, I think that's going to widely depend on how far you're going and you know, weather and in terms of like heating and or air conditioning load and that kind of thing. So trying my best to answer that, but hopefully that got what you're asking.
I can chime in on that. Those are things that we have looked at in Twin Rivers. You know, how do we do long-range field trips or sporting events? And the big advantage is going to be now that that heavy-duty electric is taking hold, and with Electrify America funding, there are more chargers going in many places, especially public places, which I would encourage everybody to talk to your local politicians and get them to put electric chargers in museums, especially heavy duty ones, but also in that DC fast charging space. Currently, we don't take our electric buses on long field trips, but eventually we will, because there will be charging everywhere. And we're looking at putting chargers in all of our sporting venues, you know, at our stadiums, so that they're available for groups that have electric buses that come in. They can charge and make it back to their location when they're done. So those are all things that we have to work on as a group. You know, if we want to take a bus up to Reno, we're going to encourage you guys to have a charger for us, but those are inter-district cooperation agreements that I think we all need to work on.
Thank you, everyone, for that answer. One last ask for questions. Is there any last minute questions? Please let me know now. If not, I want to go ahead and say thank you to everyone.
Rudy, I think we've got, yeah, sorry, we got a couple more questions. Jennifer asked one about their funding to add charging stations for Title I schools. And then I think we also wanted to briefly ask Sarah and Tim about vehicle to grid and the work that they're doing there.
Perfect. Yep. Sorry, I totally missed those two questions. So yes, I see the question now. So Jennifer did ask about charging stations and funding to add charging stations for Title I schools or distant travels to drop off students. So is there any additional funding that can be given to Title I schools in order to set up charging stations is the question.
So from NV Energy, I mean, we have the incentive program that's available to, public school districts. So it's not specific and targeting. So we're working with just the overall school districts. So I'm not, involved with the designation of which specific school. Wish I had a better answer for that one.
Awesome. Thank you. No worries. And then the last question was, it was towards Jason and Sarah, right, Carolina?
For Sarah and Tim, I think, actually. And add one last thing on that last point that Sarah was making about, how do we make sure that we get this funding to Title I schools? I think that's something that at CHISPA we're really interested in kind of exploring and what other funding opportunities exist or that we can create. Obviously, given what the economy looks like right now is a long-term question, but finding those opportunities for partnerships with private companies, with utilities and other ways, we definitely want to explore how we can expand on this after we hopefully get our first pilot program up and running and we can see some success and go from there. But yes, we did want to ask about vehicle to grid technologies, and I think Sarah and Tim have the most knowledge there.
Well, I can start. I mean, here in Nevada, I mean, vehicle to grid is something I think that's interesting, and we're certainly looking at for the future. We don't have a program today where we're offering kind of vehicle to grid services just yet, but it is something that we are actively looking at and planning for. There are certainly systems and processes that need to go in place in addition to a program designed to be able to effectively deliver that kind of program, as well as, of course, having vehicles to work with and equipment to work with. So it is something that is interesting to us. I mean, as we look at, bringing on a large amount of renewable energy into Nevada, we're looking to get creative and how we can best manage and operate the grid as efficiently as possible. And so that may be something we see in the future. If folks are interested in doing that, we would love to certainly talk with you, or if someone's looking at or interested in doing a pilot with that, that's something that we would love to hear about too.
And just for anyone who might not be completely plugged into what vehicle to grid is, Sarah or Tim, would one of you be willing to kind of just offer like a baseline 101 explanation?
That's a good question. I'll let Tim go and then I'll add whatever I can after, let him talk a little bit.
Sure. So we are getting involved with the V1 V2G project with SMUD. We've been working on all the parameters on how we're going to deploy it. We're going to start out with level 2 V2G, which V2G is where the bus gets a charge during the day, typically to go out on route. But when it's not in use at the end of the day and there's a heavy load due to high demand, the utility will then buy back the power and it will go back into the grid, and it will help with load management for the utility. And the utility will offset some of the costs of your utility rate for the use of those particular batteries or the energy left in those batteries, and then charge the batteries back up at a time when energy is at its lowest cost. So we're currently involved in a project with Sacramento Metropolitan Utility District, and we've just got the chargers installed, and we're going to do a level 2 pilot program with them to see how it works, and then for a year, And then what we're going to do is we're going to move into full-fledged level 2 and level 3 DC fast charging vehicle to grid, because it will help offset the cost of energy, which I have this thing that I really think we should be zero cost for fuel. So that's just another component to allow for the reduced cost of fuel within a school bus fleet. So that's a little bit in a nutshell of vehicle to grid. But yes, it's coming soon, and we will be able to tell our story within the next 12 months or so how it's going.
And this is Sarah, and Tim did a great job there. So for me, I kind of think of interacting with an electric school bus in a few different ways. So when interacting with a school bus, there's the interconnection, the electrical component and ties there, and then there's the integration. So to me, I think of the first phase of what Tim mentioned was V1G, or I call that managed charging. So it's kind of like the first step to, instead of the bus just sitting on the grid and being a load, it's being a load but doing it in a intelligent, managed sort of way, both to optimize the load usage locally at the school charging site, as well as to potentially optimize or time that charging to happen when it makes more sense for the overall electric system grid. So managed charging is something that we would like to look at now. I think it's something that's beneficial for both the customer and the utility, as long as it works within, of course, the use case for actually leveraging the buses. So that's kind of one phase, and that's something that we are working on now. Vehicle to grid is more of a bidirectional flow of the electricity. So that's, like Tim said, charging at one time and maybe discharging that battery on board of the electric school bus at a different time when the grid might be able to leverage that. So, for example, if you have overproduction in solar during the middle of the day and the bus is sitting in between routes, perhaps you can charge then and use that later, or discharge later after an afternoon shift is run. So there are various mechanisms of running kind of those kinds of bidirectional interaction with the utility, and they vary widely across the country. It's very similar to what you might see if you're familiar with a demand response program, that you might, as part of either an integrated demand side management portfolio, which could be for any kind of end use load. So whether that's chillers or air conditioning or heating, water heating. So there's various loads you can use to kind of do this grid interaction and derive and benefits in different ways depending on the program design. So my 2 cents there.
Thank you both for that explanation on vehicle to grid. Again, if there's no more questions, I'm looking at the question box. I don't see any more. So we will go ahead and wrap up the webinar. I just wanted to remind folks that the webinar was being recorded. We will be sharing the recording with all the participants and people that registered for the webinar. So we will be sharing the video, and we will also be sharing the doc. So the PowerPoint presentation will be shared with everyone, as well as some additional resources that we've compiled for everyone, and the contact information for all the panelists and all the panelists today, in case you want to reach out to them with more specific questions. But again, thank you. We appreciate everyone taking the time today and joining us today, and we hope that you will join us in a fight for a clean ride for kids. And lastly, I also want to thank a huge thank you to our partners at Clark County, Washoe County Health District, NV Energy, and again, this presentation would have not been possible without your help. So thank you, and we'll be if you guys have any questions, please look out for that email from after the presentation, and feel free to reach out to any one of us. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining us today.